Good morning and welcome to Need to Know Westford. I'm Kathy Ricketson.
And I'm Beth Morrison.
And we're both social workers. So this morning we're delighted to have our town clerk, Laurie Shaw, with us this morning.
Good morning.
And we are going to dive deeply into all the facets of your job and all the ways you serve the town of Westford. And you qualify as a blow-in because you've only been here how long?
It's been 13 months. I started on January 8th, 2024.
And what a year it was.
It sure has been a year.
So we are very exciting to learn more about the role of the town clerk. So before we get into that, can you tell us a little bit more about your background and how you came to us?
So I started in Natick. I was in Natick for around 10 years. Before that, I have twins. I was at home. I worked in the corporate world for many years. Then I stayed home with my kids, and it was time to go back to work. And I decided that I didn't want to be in the corporate world anymore. My father has a background working in town politics. My brother was a firefighter. So I thought, maybe I'll head in that direction.
And the call to serve gene.
Yes. Let me see how that works out. So I started in Natick. I actually started part-time in Natick in the Recreation and Parks Department. I went over to the Board of Health, and that was just for a short period of time. And then I went to the clerk's office. And I learned a lot in the clerk's office, and I really enjoyed it. I enjoy the interaction with the people, and the clerk handles elections, which we'll get into, we'll talk about. And I really loved that piece of it. I became the assistant town clerk in Natick, and then I moved over to Westford as the town.
So you've really had a long time to understand the role of town clerk. Well, who works with you in your office? And tell us a little bit about that.
So right now we have brand new assistant town clerk. Her name is Jess. She's wonderful. We work great together. We are in the process of hiring one more full-time person. We have had a bit of a turnover. We had 2 part-time people. We pushed that job into one full-time position, and we're in the process now of interviewing for that position. So we'll have 3 full-time people in the clerk's office once that position is filled.
In researching the role of town clerk, I went to the Secretary of State's website, and I was amazed to find there's a very, very long page outlining the responsibilities of the town clerk. And as we said, some items people may not be aware of, such as keeping vital town records, certifying all debt notes and bonds for the town, and you certify warrant articles for the town meeting as well. Tell us some of the things most people don't know about your job.
I think, and this was something that I didn't even know when I started in the clerk's office in Natick. The clerk handles what I like to say, everything election, everything from start to finish. So ballots, now that we all know that vote by mail is huge, actually what studies are finding is vote by mail, it's becoming more of a half and half. Half the population is voting by mail now, and the other half of the population they're still showing up at the polls. That number has increased, and it continues to increase. So it starts with us. People want ballots. We send them the ballots depending on what type of election it is. A local election, I order the ballots. If it's a state election, the state sends us the ballots. People request the ballots. Most of you probably see the little cards that come in the mail. Would you like to vote by mail? So we enter all those into our system. We send people ballots. When the ballots come back, we enter them back into our system so the voter can see. I don't know if you've ever noticed, you can also check now to see if we received your ballot. We enter that into the system. It also keeps track of everything. We organize all the ballots and get them all ready to go over to the precincts for the election workers to open them and send them through the machines. So that's pretty much everything in a nutshell, but there's everything that goes on in between. So then the clerk also has to staff all the elections. We hire all the election workers. We staff all the elections. And we have to make sure that all the election workers are trained on the poll pads. We just switched to poll pads recently. They're all trained on the poll pads, and they have all the paperwork they need, and they have the understanding of all the different types of issues that can come up during the day. At the end of the day, we make sure that the machines are counting the ballots accurately. We have the poll workers keep track of that as well. We close everything up at the end of the day. We have the police officers bring all the ballots. Most of them, any used ballots, meaning they've been voted on, are all locked up. We make sure that our ballot machines have counted everything correctly. We bring all the numbers back, and usually that's about 10:30 at night by the time that's all wrapped up. But that still isn't the end. For example, the presidential election. We were accepting ballots for, I believe, it was another 20 days. When all the information comes back, we come back in the next morning and we start again, and we start sorting through precinct by precinct, counting the ballots, making sure we're checking every ballot to make sure all the ballots that went out came back. It's a huge process, and it's a very important process.
Can you explain the poll pads? Because you mentioned it, and I know that has been a big transition to using the poll pads. So can you explain more what that process is?
I can. So do you remember back in the day when you went into the precincts to vote, and they were very thick, what we call voter lists? And you would give them your name, and someone would have a ruler and a red pen, and they would go through the streets and they would check it off. A poll pad is that list, only on, a poll pad, they're called poll pads, but what it actually is an iPad. But you can't play games on it. You can't do anything other than just election information. So it is the voter list on an iPad. So when you walk in, instead of, the poll worker having to take 10 minutes to find your name in your street, you just give them your name, they can see your name, and they check you off, and they send you on your way. So it helps the poll workers in the process. It makes things move along much quicker.
Yeah, and I think we've made some investments. I think we used ARPA money.
Yes.
And I remember you coming to FinCom and asking for a printer or something.
Yes.
So I know that there have been investments made in the system by the town over the last year or more.
And when you say the poll pads are secure, you mean not internet connected?
They are not internet connected. That's correct. The only information that's on a poll pad is the voter information that is on the list that we used to see years ago. So no one can sort of hack into a poll pad.
So some of your lesser known duties, one of them is reporting to the Division of Local Services. So what is that office, and what do you have to report?
The DLS, that is something brand new that I'm dealing with in the assessor's office, which is why I didn't recognize it at first. So the assessor does have certifications when they change the tax rate, when they do anything like that. They have something called a DLS gateway that they have to enter all their information in. So what the clerk does is she certifies all that information. I sit with the assessor, I certify all that information, and we send it in, it's electronic, through the DLS gateway.
Okay, so that it's a secure gateway.
For the clerk's office, we have to certify many things. In this instance, with the assessor's office, we have to certify when the assessor changes a tax rate. There's a long process that goes through. And not everything, but most things have to go through the clerk's office in the end to have them certify it, which is basically giving their signature with a stamp in some cases that has the corporate town seal on it. And in other cases, it's called a true copy attest. And it just means that I have looked it over and I agree with the information that's on there. And if it's certified by the clerk's office, that means it's okay to go.
And who are the other eyes on those numbers? Is that something that the town manager looks at and the select board, or is it just you? I know you have to be the certifier, but
in the case of the DLS, I believe Dan O'Donnell has to take a look at it for the tax rate. FinCom may somehow be involved, but I'm not quite sure of that
I think
piece.
we just oversee the budget. I think town meeting ultimately certifies.
Yes.
right.
with approving the budget and passing the warrant articles. I don't know if certain things may go through, but you probably certify the town meeting results as well.
I absolutely do. I will certify any changes that have gone through, any votes that have gone through, zoning articles that have changed. I certify all of those. And interestingly enough, as I said a moment ago, many things have to go through the clerk's office and they have to be certified. It's another check, and in many ways, it's the final check. A lot of this information won't be accepted unless it has the town clerk's certification on it, which is really overall a stamp of approval to say, yes, I see this, I read this, I agree with this, and this is a true copy attest, and it is certified.
This is so interesting because the public trust is so much built on the process of certifying, our elections and our town meeting business and so on and so forth. So that's very interesting that you're sort of the final. And I love that there's a real town seal and that it actually gets stamped on things.
Yes.
So maybe now we could take a moment to talk about the more fun aspects of your job. And I believe you are our official Justice of the Peace.
I am. I am.
So can you tell us a little about that?
It is a fun part of the job. So as a Justice of Peace, and I actually, when I became an assistant town clerk, you can become a Justice of Peace as well. I did a little bit of research on it to find out what it meant and what it was all about. And it goes way back in time. And it's something that is just carried through still to this day. So assistant town clerks and town clerks can marry people. And it's a very fun piece of the job because think about it, when you're marrying someone, everyone's happy. They're thrilled. They come in and we see all kinds of different people come in. Sometimes they come in with full-on beautiful wedding dress and tuxedos and a wedding party, all the way down to I've seen couples with farmer jeans on that are ripped and they're just coming in quickly saying, just marry us and get this over and done with. But it is such a fun piece of the job because everyone's happy.
Well, what's the process? Can you just walk into town hall and say, marry us, or do they have to fill out a form? Or
So what they have to do, and if any of you are married here, you probably don't remember this piece of it, but you have to fill out something called marriage intentions. So if you're getting married in Massachusetts, you can go to any city or town hall in Massachusetts to begin the process, and that is filling out your marriage intention. You have to stay in Massachusetts, though. If you were to get married in another state, you have to fill out your marriage intentions in another state. But in Massachusetts, you come into a city or town hall, you fill out your marriage intentions. And from your marriage intentions, we put together your marriage certificate. You have to wait 3 days before you can go and get married. And I'm not sure, I've actually done some research on that too to find out what the 3 days is all about. There was a time when you had to take blood tests before you can go in.
Yes,
but
I
you
did.
don't have to do that anymore.
Day. Yep.
And I think maybe that's what the 3 days started with. You had to wait for the blood tests to come back, but you don't have to take the blood tests anymore.
It was a test for syphilis.
Yes, exactly.
Going back to an era where these were infectious, contagious diseases, and you had to protect the public.
Right. But they don't do the blood tests anymore, but you still have to wait the 3 days. I don't know exactly why you have to do that.
In case you change your mind, you know.
Right.
Exactly.
It's your last chance.
Exactly. So you wait the 3 days, and then the couples, sometimes they ask me to marry them. It's a big thing that's happening today, is couples don't want to spend all the money on a wedding. So they just want something real quick. So they'll ask me to marry them. In some cases, I'll do that. In many cases, they already have a wedding planned somewhere. So they have to get married within 60 days from when they fill out that paperwork. Either way, before they go and get married, they have to come back in after the 3 days, at some point between 3 days and 60 days, and pick up their actual marriage certificate, which is what you see in the end. We put the marriage certificate together for you. They bring the marriage certificate to the officiant that's marrying them. They get married. The officiant sends it back. We register it, and we certify it. We give it a stamp again, and you're official.
And does it require witnesses?
Not anymore.
Not anymore.
Not anymore.
Okay.
It does not require a witness. No. And what I try to explain to these couples if they're having two weddings, if they're going to have a destination wedding, that they have to remember that the official wedding date is the one that happened at town hall, because they'll have two wedding dates and they get confused and they don't know where their marriage certificate is. They don't know what their actual wedding date is. So I go through the whole explanation. Just remember that this day that I'm marrying you, that you're getting married in town hall, is your actual wedding date. You're going to have two, but this is your wedding date, and your marriage certificate will always be here in this town hall.
A marriage certificate is an automatic name change. You don't have to go to court. If you want to, if either one of you wants to change your name, you can do so on your marriage certificate at that time. And it doesn't even have to be each other's names. You could both change your name to anything.
That is absolutely correct. It for the last name only. In many cases, people want to move their middle name and they want to take their maiden name and make it their middle name. In that case, they would have to go to the local courthouse to do that. But you are correct. Men can also change their name. And right. I have seen very interesting name changes. I have seen, more often than not, the men don't change their name. But in the cases that I've seen it, I saw one couple split both of their last names and put them together and make that one their last name.
We did consider that.
Wow. So you have a lot of the human story right there appearing in your office.
So, moving on, you also have to attend select board meetings and interact with select board. So, are there other, town boards that you work with directly or that have oversight?
So recently, well, I've only worked here for 13 months. So I would say probably in the last 6 months, I am on the bylaw and what is it called here? The bylaw review committee, I believe it's called.
It.
I haven't gotten together with anyone yet to go over any bylaw changes, but I do think it's a great committee once we get everything in place and moving, because during town meeting, there are changes with some of these. The zoning bylaws can change, regular bylaws can change, and I think it's a good idea that when these changes before they go into place or before they even go in front of town meeting, that there is a review committee that goes over them to make sure that all the wording is correct. There was something that went through recently. It was one of the town meetings. There was a bylaw change, and I think this was when I ended up on the board, because when it was time to make the change, I had noticed a new bylaw was coming in, but we weren't clear on how it was going to overlap with the present bylaw. And that's when we talked about it. I talked about it with Kristen, the town manager, and I thought, okay, this last bylaw is huge. How do we know what we're taking out and what we're adding in? So that's when we thought, okay, that we should really start to get this committee in place and start to think about this kind of stuff, so it's not something that happens after the fact. It's something that we're ready for before it happens.
Well, coming back to your most visible role of running our elections, you started when?
I started on January 8th, 2024.
And how many elections did Westford have in 2024?
4 elections, including the presidential election, which is just a mammoth. It has become a mammoth election with the early voting and the vote by mail. And we had 3 town meetings in there too, which 2 of the town meetings, one of them, as you know, one of them was canceled due to capacity.
Broke records.
And then that was moved to April, which we checked in just under 2,100 people at that town meeting, which absolutely broke a record.
It was amazing to, have that first meeting had to be called for capacity and logistical, problems of trying to get everyone in, and then we came right back the next month. And in that month, you, the town moderator, WestfordCAT, were prepared for those big numbers.
Yes, we were prepared for those big numbers. I have to say, when I came from Natick had representative town meeting. The most we checked in, our quorum was 91 people. We had to hit 91. And when I came to Westford and I had learned of the October 23 town meeting where there were issues and they weren't ready for such a huge crowd, I watched that meeting. I have to be honest, I was very nervous. I don't think I slept for 3 weeks. I thought, I have to pull this off. But part of being a town clerk, and it's one thing that I love about it, is event planning. I love event planning. We can get back to weddings. When I got married back in 92, I had so much fun planning my wedding. I wanted to be, I thought, a wedding planner. I loved the planning. I planned it all the way down to the details of the timing of the music. So that's one of the many things that I love about being a town clerk. As stressful as it is, putting together town meetings and town elections, I love the challenge, and I love the challenge of it. I love the detail of putting a huge event together, and I love the satisfaction. There are so many moving parts in something like this. I love the satisfaction of it all pulling together. It's never going to be perfect because there's just too many moving parts, but the satisfaction of pulling something that huge together is very satisfying for me. I think in another life I will be an event planner, but it is a big piece of what I do in the town clerk's office.
I think as a participant, as a regular citizen of the town, it is so impressive to see the whole town come together. I mean, it's one of the occasions where you see the government of the town come right into the same space. So FinCom and the select board and our police chief and all the different roles that people play, and they're all right there, ready to answer questions at a moment's notice, ready to, pivot on certain issues that have come up. New information comes in. It's such a dynamic process, but it's a spectacle.
I have to say, I was impressed by watching how Westford pulls their town meetings together from start to finish. Monday morning after the big town meeting where we had out on the field, we had just under 2,100 people. Kristen came in and she and I were talking about it. And I said, Kristen, you realize that putting a meeting together like that, usually corporations come in and do that. And we did it. We're just a bunch of municipal town workers, and we each had our piece, and we pulled it together. And she said, I know. But we started talking about the details of the meeting. And I'm impressed. Kristen sits with the department heads and goes through the warrant articles and gets everyone, they all get themselves prepared to answer the questions. So that's why you find, I'm impressed listening to the department heads speak when they get up and they're asked questions. They're articulate, they get right to the point, they practice that, and that's impressive to watch. All the way to Mike in IT, he is so invested in getting those clickers all set up and ready to go. In many cases, we're borrowing them from other towns. He's got to get in there and get them all set up and make sure they're working properly. Everyone has their piece, and everyone is so invested in making it work. And again, as I mentioned, something of this size can never be perfect, but it's impressive when you watch everyone come together and pull their piece together and what happened. So the just under 2,100 people went off fairly well for municipal workers pulling together a meeting of that size. It was impressive to watch everyone's piece of it.
Many people are amazed that we still have a direct town meeting, and it's something that I've always actually loved myself.
Mm-hmm. So town meeting is like this whole show, but there's also all the town elections, and you have to coordinate, all the people who are volunteering and working, and you have to, make sure all the ballots are correct. That seems like also a lot of work. Just town meeting is a different animal, but I also feel like the elections is, and I think that it's interesting. People think of elections is like top down, but it really is a bottom up experience. Like it's completely controlled by the town for the most part. Like,
yes.
I mean,
completely.
Yeah.
Yes. And I enjoy both of them. But as you mentioned, town meeting and elections are two completely different animals. I find town meeting to be easier than elections.
That's interesting.
I
Wow.
do, believe it or not. But I think if I were to really put some thought into it, there are so many moving parts in both, but elections definitely is tripled the moving parts. And there are so many with the Mass General laws that are changing and the guidelines being added with all this early voting and vote by mail. That is also something in the clerk's office that I have to stay on top of. I have to make sure that we're following the guidelines. We're doing everything exactly the way we should be doing it. And they're changing constantly. As the weeks and years go on, as these elections come up, where something has changed and we have to be on top of it. It's very important to be on top of it. So yes, an election is more challenging to me because of that. It's the same, town meeting is the same. We have guidelines we have to follow, but the guidelines are so much more strict with elections, and we really need to be on top of them. We need to, and we have something new that's happening in town meeting and elections, which is very important, and it's fallen by the wayside. I'm very happy to see that the ADA is coming in, and they want to make sure that everything is handicapped accessible. That's something that should always have been in place.
So that's the American with Disabilities Act.
Correct. That is something that should have always been in place, but I have to be honest, in the 10 years that I've been in the clerk's office, no one has really paid very much attention to it until the last couple of years. So that's also a new part that's very important, but it's really starting to find its place in elections and town meetings. We have to make sure that we're up to code in that our tables are the right height for anyone that comes in with a wheelchair, that it's handicapped accessible in every way. The Commission
That's
on
really important.
It is important. The Commission on Disabilities has been working with us at town meeting and elections to make sure that we have everything in place.
I'm so happy to hear that because I had a childhood disability, and when I see how much it benefits our whole population, back when it was passed and they were complaining about having to make bathrooms bigger and elevators and so on and so forth, it immediately benefited every parent with children with strollers, older people with walkers. It's not just wheelchairs. There's all kinds of mobility issues. If you've ever been on crutches, you feel grateful to the ADA because you can actually get into the mall or you can get into school. So it's changed so rapidly, whereas in my childhood, none of these things existed, and it created a terrible barrier.
Absolutely. And that's why I'm glad to see that there's such a big push for it. When we go to our conferences, the Clerks Conference, so there are, I don't know if you've ever noticed this, and sadly, I have to teach everyone how to use these because they've been around forever, but they're called auto marks. And what they do is they automatically mark the ballot for anyone who has a disability that needs it. It's a huge 50-pound machine that is at every precinct, but no one has ever used them, and so no one has ever really paid much attention to them. Now, when we go to our conferences, the state is stepping right in saying, you need to start using these. You need to teach the poll workers. You need to teach the staff how to use these. And I'm seeing a big difference in people stepping forward saying, why is there not a table for a wheelchair? Or do you understand that that table's not high enough? It needs to be a certain height. They are absolutely correct, and we want to provide what we can for them.
That's so encouraging. My mother suffered blindness from macular degeneration, and I would take her to vote.
Mm-hmm.
And if that happens, then the poll worker takes the person aside, the way they kind of do at the airport,
Mm-hmm.
away from you so that you can't influence their vote
Mm-hmm.
in any way. And because sometimes we would disagree on the voting. And my mother would wave bye-bye to me. She was in her 90s and just smile. And she'd go with the poll worker and they would fill out the ballot for her.
Okay.
Because as a person with blindness later in life, she didn't have Braille, but there were also Braille ballots.
I don't know that I've ever seen a Braille
Yes,
ballot.
there were.
Okay.
So I very much appreciated that. And she did too, because she loved to vote, and she would have been crushed if there had been some barrier to her voting. So this is all very, very important.
It's very important.
I just wanted to follow up on one thing. You said you hire the election workers, but these are volunteers.
Hire is not the correct word. Is not
Okay,
the
because
correct
we're always looking for more poll workers. Hint, hint to
Yes.
everyone listening to this podcast. We
Yes.
need poll workers. We need wardens. But every poll worker takes an oath.
Every poll worker takes an oath.
What is the oath?
Do you want the wording of the oath? I don't know that I have it
Well,
memorized.
the essence of it, yes.
So basically, I think like any oath, what you do is you raise your right hand and you swear that you're abiding by the rules and the guidelines and the laws of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. And that I don't recall, I do have the oath, and I make sure that all the wardens give everybody the oath at the beginning. But I don't have the wording of the oath. It's a little bit different for different things, but I think what they have to do as a poll worker is it's confidential. They have to remain confidential, and just basically they're swearing that they're abiding by the guidelines and the rules and the regulations of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts.
So I think that's so powerful that you're sworn in and you take an oath. Now, our ideal is that our town elections are nonpartisan.
Mm-hmm.
And that's an ideal that we've tried to keep here in Westford. Poll workers are of every stripe, every political persuasion, and they are your friends and your neighbors. And I think that's what's really important to understand. If you've ever worked in any of the elections, it's so heartening to look across a room and see people that you know working really, really hard and with such integrity.
And I think that that's important to remember with the poll workers. They are volunteers. In many cases, they get paid minimum wage, and that is certainly, they deserve to get paid that and more. In some cases, some of the poll workers just simply volunteer. They don't want to be paid for it. But either way, it's important to understand how dedicated these poll workers are and how hard they work during the day. I find it's a long day. In some municipalities, they work full days. I give these poll workers the option to work full days. Most of them don't want to, and I don't blame them. That's a long day. They start at 6 a.m. and they end at 8:30 at night. That's a very long day. So for the most part in Westford, we have part-time poll workers, but still, especially in today's political climate, it's changing. It's not always as pleasant as it used to be. And there are challenges sometimes, and these poll workers get yelled at by people. They get, and no one deserves that, but they are dedicating their time and
their fellow residents.
And their fellow,
Just like
yes, yes. I'm thinking of an example. I don't remember which election it was, but I think, again, going back to today's political climate, sometimes people are upset with other people for whatever the reasons may be. And there was a nice mix of people at one of the elections, and I wanted this. And some of the poll workers came back to me and said, I worked with this person or that person, and I didn't know them before, and they're wonderful. I was so happy that I got to know them. And I love hearing that, because that's exactly what I want. I want everyone to just get to know each other. It doesn't really matter who you voted for or how you voted. Your neighbors, your friends, in some cases you're related. We're all people.
Every friend is a stranger
That's
until
right.
you get to know them.
That's right. That's right.
Well, I think that's one, even though there has been, some more division in our country and in our town too, it is a way for people to come together on that all important day.
Yes.
Obviously, people, when they get frustrated, they will take their frustrations out on you too. I think that's been a part of the job as well.
That can be a challenging part of the job, but I remember when I worked in Natick and I had become an assistant, the town clerk in Natick said to me, Laurie, if you're going to do a job like this, you have to have really thick skin. My skin has gotten much thicker. It's not always easy. I think for the most part, I do understand that it's not about me personally. It's just about whatever's going on. For the most part, you can just let it slide and not take it personal. But I think there are a few occasions here and there when I might shed a tear or two because I'm a little mad or frustrated. But for the most part, you wouldn't do a job like this if you didn't love it, if you didn't love the people and the process. In the end, when on the rare occasion that I do get super frustrated, I say that to myself. I really do love the people and I love the process.
So is there anything else that we need to know about the job of town clerk? And most importantly, are you enjoying the job so far?
I am enjoying the job, as I just mentioned. I want to try and answer this without going in too many directions, but working with people and seeing a job well done, seeing people get along. I love the challenge. So yes, to answer your question, I very much enjoy this job. I enjoy the ins and outs and even the ups and downs. And I have learned so much, and I learned so much in the crazy 10 months that I was here with 4 elections in 2 of the 3 huge town meetings. It was very interesting. I've gotten to know the people in Westford, the poll workers, and the residents much quicker because of these town meetings in the elections than I did in the years that I was in Natick. It took me a while because there was space in between, but it was just rapid fire. And it was challenging and nerve-wracking, and I didn't sleep very much, but I learned a lot.
We have our local elections on May 6th.
Right now, this is the only contested race, is the select board. There's 2 seats open, and there's 4 people have returned their papers. The local election is nonpartisan, and I've enjoyed it.
All right. Well, with our great tradition of New England town meeting, it's interesting for all of us.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you again, Laurie, for being with us today. And good luck with your next year.
Thank you. I know the next year is going to be a little bit slower than my first crazy year, but it's very busy in the clerk's office day to day, and I'm very much enjoying it. And thank you for having me.
You're welcome.